think China's rise is mainly a combination of scale. Everybody knows this is the most populous country on earth, and governmental policy, which experimented until it finally found a solution that worked. That if we say that China's industrial rise started maybe 30 years ago when it began opening up to the West and began loosening the Maoist controls, that was after about 50 years of nonstop disaster for China, of war, of famine, of policies that destroyed the country's culture and many millions of its people. So after very brutal trial and error, China decided to open itself up, and it has been the policy has been steadily adjusted year by year, sometimes month by month, to relieve whatever is the emergency of the moment. There's always a new emergency, there's some adjustment for that, and another emergency comes up. But because the communist Chinese government has been remarkably flexible over the last 30 years, they've been able to harness their own internal goals with the dynamism of the world's external economy and produce something significant for their people. The bargain that the Chinese government has chosen for its people without their active consent, but with their implied consent over the last generation, is a more dramatic version of the bargain that Japan and Korea, some other countries, have struck. The difference being that China is poor. Essentially, it's being that by emphasizing manufacturing expansion, of having tens of millions of new jobs in the manufacturing sector that people can come in from the countryside and take, China has been able to bring people out of rural poverty more successfully than any other culture or economy has ever done before. Many tens of millions of people now have some cash income who used to be just stuck on the farm. It's done that, and it's also guaranteed that almost all people in the country are somewhat better off year by year by year, moving up rather than moving down. It's done that at the expense of keeping its currency artificially cheap, living at an artificially low level compared to what it could do. But that's been a bargain that's been, on the whole, a plus for the Chinese government and most of the Chinese people. So there are questions about the sustainability of that in the long run, but that's been the social contract in China for the last generation. As we talk in late 2008, as the world economic and financial crisis really is in a descent, China is more vulnerable to the disruptions and the whipsawing of these changes even than the United States is, because whether it intends to or not, the United States is simply going to reduce its consumption over the next year or 2 or 5 years ahead because there's less money for everybody to spend. That will mean substantially less consumption from China, and that means dramatically fewer jobs for people within China. So what is a significant slowdown in demand in the United States is going to be felt as a much larger one within China. And that's why the government here is trying a proportionately larger stimulus plan than has been proposed in the United States, just because there is going to be, and is already being felt, a real contraction in the very jobs that have helped people get out of rural poverty over the last generation. So this is as significant an economic/social challenge as the Chinese regime has faced in probably 20 years. I think there is an unconscious desire on many Americans' part to have a simple, clear way to think of China. China is bad or China is good. China is bad because it's a dictatorship, because they're poisoning us, et cetera, et cetera. Or it's good because they want to be like Americans and they are opening up. Both of those simplifications, like any other simple view, are wrong, and China is simply too important to America in the long run to be classified, to be pigeonholed that simply. It's as if black people and white people had the same all or nothing view of each other within the United States. And I think actually the racial balance inside the U.S. is a useful analogy here, because what one sees in a genuinely diverse society is that the individuality of people matters more than anything else, and there are strengths and weaknesses in every culture that makes up part of the United States. So too in the American attitude towards China, I think. To me, the main lesson foreigners get by living in China is to appreciate how diverse this place is. It's 1 billion plus people and 1 billion plus real individuals. They don't spend all their time sitting around thinking, how am I going to advance China's rise in the world? They're thinking about, how am I going to pay the rent? and how am I going to get my son to have a better job, and how am I going to pay for the school expenses or pay hospital for my grandma and all the rest. And it's mainly individuals who, in my experience, are very open and approachable as people. And so number one, it's a very diverse country. Number two, it's a country with problems way more serious than America's problems right now, or Germany's problems, or anybody else's. You know, it's a basically very poor country still. It has all sorts of challenges that it needs to meet just to stay going. So if Americans psychologically were able to recognize what a diverse place this is, what a challenging path it has ahead of itself, I think it would be easier for them to recognize this is the country to deal with, but neither condescend to nor fear.